Hi, thank you for joining me, Emily, on Temple Not Made by Hands. Today we're looking at Nehemiah 2, the holy hand of God. So we're just coming out of that holy hush that we saw Nehemiah as he was preparing his heart for about 4 months. Roughly 4 months he went into that time of prayer and fasting and seeking the Lord. So I don't know if that means that he took a leave of absence from work or if he was just able to contain himself before the king. But this day, he's not able to contain himself. This day, it's in the month of Nisan, which for our calendar is around March or April. And so it's this day, and all this praying and all this fasting and seeking the Lord led up to day this day. So he's going before the king and he cannot contain himself. And the king sees that something is wrong with him and he says, "You're not sick. This is nothing but sorrow of heart." He sees the grief on his face and he says, "What's wrong?" So this tells us that the king does have some concern for Nehemiah, that Nehemiah is respected and the king has concern for him. And I think we can infer this because part of Nehemiah's job is to keep the spirits of everybody up. And if he's unable to fulfill that, then the king could fire him, kick him out, or even kill him. And Nehemiah knows this. So at this question, it says he became dreadfully afraid. Dreadfully afraid. But then we also see a little quick silent prayer and he aligns himself with God. So he has confidence to speak to the king. We see his fear transforming into faith, and then we'll see it rise up into boldness. The king is asking him what is wrong. So that's a huge risk that Nehemiah was taking to present himself in front of the king this way. It was a huge risk. But it also shows us the king did have concern for him. He wanted to know what was wrong. And then Nehemiah said, "The gates of my father, it's burnt down. Everything is laying in rubble." And then the king asks him what he can do for him. And he said, "Can you send me that I can go rebuild it? Can you send me that I can go rebuild it?" And then the king says, "How long?" That's a reasonable question. Well, how long will it take? So the main thing I want to highlight in this chapter is the clarity in his request. The clarity in his request. He had that clarity because he had that time with God. He knew his position. He knew what he was being called to do. There was so much that needed to be done before this. There's so much that needs to be done after that. There's so much that needs to be done in the midst of it. But there was clarity in his request and his part of it. I need to go rebuild these walls. That is the part that is burdening his heart. And then they're able to talk together to set up a time. We need time with God. We need prayer time, not because God needs our prayers, but because we need to be able to hear from God. And that's the place that we do. Prayer is communication with God. Prayer is more about listening than unloading. So the best advice I ever heard was, as much time as you spend unloading and talking to God, spend that much time listening. So if you just prayed 5 minutes and you were talking and telling God your laundry list, spend that much time in silence, listening. That's where transformation happens. It starts on the inside and then you are compelled and it works its way out. So we see that with Nehemiah, that his fear, because he was fearful. Fear is a normal human response, but what we do with that fear matters. Do we make our decisions and plans out of that fear? Or are we taking them to the Lord? If we take them to the Lord, then like Nehemiah, that fear will be transformed into faith and then boldness. Can I go rebuild it? He's getting permission. He's getting permission. Can I go rebuild it? Well, how long will it take? And then they set a time together. That's what it says. Then it said a time together. And this is important because I do believe that we are in a season that God is repositioning his people. He's calling us in and out of different areas, and how we transition matters. If you are one of those people that he's repositioning, how you transition matters. When God is calling you out of something, to take something new, it requires a letting go. We have to be able to let go of something to take it up. But he's not a God of chaos either, and how we transition matters. Nia knows that people are depending on him where he is, and he takes that seriously. If we can't go to the next level if we don't see the value of where we are. If we don't care about the people around us now, then we're not going to care about the people that are in that next place either. How you transition matters. Do you see the value of you where you are now? If there's not a value of you here, then what are you actually taking over there? So Nehemiah knows the power of his influence where he is, and it's going to take time to transition, and he needs the support of the king. So this is an earthly king that he's talking to, but we serve a heavenly king, and we need his support. And because Nehemiah did this the right way, he got permission. So guess what came with that permission? Protection and provision. Do not jump ahead of God and bypass the protection and provision that comes with staying in step with God. This is a God thing. So God is preparing the steps, and Nehemiah needed time with God to get in line with what God was doing, and then to have the boldness to have this conversation with his boss. How you exit matters. If he had just quit, he would not have had the protection and provision that he needed. So let's watch this. So you see that transformation happening, because now he's telling him what the problem is. This is what I want to do. And then the king says, okay, let's set a time. They set a time. But now watch what Nehemiah does. He asks him, okay, in verse 7, furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the regions beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through till I come to Judah. And let the letters to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, include in these letters that he must give me timber and make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple. Okay, so he's asking for protection because he knows there are enemies all around them. There are enemies all over. So if he's going without protection, he would likely not even make it to his destination. He would be killed because of the militaries that are set up around there. But he's asking him, he said, can I get letters of protection to distribute? And then he takes it a step further. And then, as I'm going on my journey, can you also require them to give me the timber that I'm going to need to build? And the king does it. Divine protection, divine provision, because he was in the presence of the King of Kings to get his divine strategy. But it took faith to step out in that. So he got this request. No, so what is this speaking to us? Take that time with God to prepare, and then ask. We need to step out in faith. That's what he did. He stepped out in faith, and then he asked. The Bible tells us that if we seek, we will find. If we ask, the door we will find. And then if we ask, the door will be opened. So some things we just don't have it because we haven't asked. Or like James tells us, in the book of James, he says you don't have because when you do ask, you're asking amiss. You're asking just for your own gain and the things that you are concerned about. You haven't got a hold of the heart of God. So some things we don't have it because we just didn't ask. We just didn't ask. He prayed first. God is the one who works in the heart of man. All favor comes from him. So if we are not walking in his favor, it's not for the person to argue with them of why we don't have it. Take that to God. God, why don't I have favor? Because you work in the hearts of man and you prepare my steps and in the way that I should go. How come I don't have favor? And it might be just because you need to back up and have that holy hush so that you can hear from the Lord and step out when it's time. Divine time. And that's what we are watching here. It's a divine time, a divine strategy, and the good hand of the Lord is upon him. And then that's where we get that saying, because that's what he says in verse 8. And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me. God longs to be gracious to you. So let's ask. But make sure you're not asking amiss. And the only way you're going to know you're not amiss is if you spent time in that secret place with the Lord. So I'm going to give you a little acronym within the word focus. That's what I want our biggest takeaway to be. Finite objectives constructed using strategy. I'm going to also put this in the notes if you find it helpful, and then you can look at it later if you need help developing a strategy to help you focus or to narrow down what is it that God wants me to do, because there's so much that needs to be done within the house of the Lord. And if God is calling you, but you haven't narrowed down this focus, I believe that this will help you. And we need focus. Finite objectives constructed using strategy. Do you have it? Because without it, everything is formless and void. You see, in the beginning, in Genesis, in the beginning, we see the Spirit of God was hovering over this cosmic cluster of chaos. But when God invaded that darkness, that chaos, he made a distinction between light and dark, right and wrong, blessing and cursing. And then he drew order out of that chaos one day at a time. One day at a time. So this tells me that there is value in the activities and the rest of each day, especially when we are intentional about them. So obviously the first thing that we need to do is ask God to invade our space. But then will we listen for him to order our steps? Our activities should be finite with a beginning and with an end, but they are connected to an infinite God. Our objectives should be clear, leading us from glory to glory as we complete one thing and then start another. And then when our steps are ordered by the Lord, it is constructed with a predetermined plan in mind. Not your plan, unless it was put there by the Lord, but the predetermined one, because we're told in the Bible that we're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works that he prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So we're not saved by our works, but for good works. He saved you. He set you apart and he anointed you for a good work. And then he's the one that we should be getting that plan from. It's predetermined, his predetermined plan. So if we recognize, value, and use the tools that he has given us, then we will operate in divine strategy and persevere to the promise. So F, finite. What is the time frame that you will be working within? O, objective. What is it that you want to do? It should be clear and concise. For him, I want to go back and rebuild the walls and the gates. For us, it might be, I want to get my finances in order. I want to get my fitness straight. I want to go on a missions trip, and which is essentially what he is doing here, is a missions trip. I want to change careers or jobs because this isn't the direction I want to go. This is where I feel like I'm called to go. So objective, make it clear and concise. Constructed, what would you have to do for this to happen? So just using your imagination, like Nehemiah, he said, okay, I want to go from here to Jerusalem, but I know that there's provisions that I need, and I also need protection. So I'm going to have to ask the king. I'm going to have to ask for this. So here he required letters because he knew that there were enemies all around it that he needed protection from. So what would you have to do? For him, he needed letters to alert all these people around. He needed communication and that network. Then using what tools, resources, gifts, and talents do you have or do you need to accomplish this thing? So for us, we have the internet. We have, depending what your goal is, maybe you need that, maybe you don't. Whatever your goal is, maybe you need that. If it's a fitness goal, do you have a gym membership? Do you have internet? There's so much flooded on the internet for that. Do you have accountability? Do you have an accountability partner? So whatever it is that he's asking you to do, what do you have access to right now that could be used to help you to do that? And is there anything that stands out that you will need that you don't have? Then how will you get them? So what are you using? Then S is our strategy. Here's where you map it out. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to let go of? What are you willing to add? What obstacles do you foresee? And then how are you going to overcome them? What will your daily habits look like? And then how will that form your week? Proverbs 16:3 says, commit your works to the Lord, and then your thoughts will be established. So evaluate your commitments, because commitments dictate the patterns of your thoughts. We get that the other way around. We think our heart has to guide everything, but just like the psalmist said, he anoints my head with oil till my cup runs over. What you're thinking about will saturate your heart and dictate what you do. Keep the thoughts guarded. And then we do that by our commitments. What are you committed to? What you think about will saturate your heart and dictate what you do. Excuse me. It will. So evaluate your commitments. Wrong commitments, wrong habits, wrong thoughts will cloud your vision, and it will fatigue your faith. Evaluate commitments. We are told, keep the thoughts captive. That is our part. God said he'll give you a new heart, but he did not say he'll give you a new mind. And he, as a matter of fact, said that was our responsibility. Take thoughts captive. Do not let your mind just be all over the place. They will be taken captive by what you focus on. So we can detox our cluttered thinking with focus. Finite objectives constructed using strategy, divine strategy. Focus. Detox cluttered thinking with focus. Instead of thinking randomly, check, evaluate, and direct your thoughts by commitment. So you cannot focus on everything. So limit it. Limit your focus to the direction that you want to go within your territory. Yes, these things are happening there, but if they have nothing to do with you, what are you going to do about it? Those things are still going to happen. And if you focus on that area where you have nothing to do with it, then you're going to miss all the things that are right in front of you. I believe one of Satan's tactics is to get us living outside of our territory, so we become self-destructive within it. The news does that. Anything that you see on on the TV, on the news especially, it's usually presented apart from God's grace. Yeah, these things might be happening, but in what rhythms are they happening in? Is God present in those or not? You will never know that by watching the news, because God says he'll give us grace for the day. He's there when we need him, when we need that grace. So when we're looking at things afar off, then that can get us living in anxiety and depression. We will not live in the grace for tomorrow if we don't know how to attain it today. And that starts with our daily commitments and taking care of the things that are around us. In the words of Tony Evans, you can't stop the rain, but you can put your umbrella up. Your area of influence should be changing. You might not be able to change that area, but you can do something about this one. So everything will line up with whatever you focus on. Find your focus. Find your focus, and then set up the boundaries that you're going to need to protect it. Take those thoughts captive and then write them down. Write it down, because in the words of Paul, we are not like those who run aimlessly, and we're not like boxers who just beat the air. We need to be intentional. So that's the word. So thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening. I do hope that this blesses you and that you will find your focus, get permission, get protection, and get provision. There you go. There you have it. Thank you, and I will see you next time. God bless you.